Now today in the shop, we worked on Joe Padula's 888 Ducati. There were some scratches in it we tried to remove. There were some little paint imperfections we tried to get out using 2000 grit sandpaper and various compounds, and a lot of it by hand. But this is just one of the projects we've worked on over the years, and I think there's some information might be worth sharing. But even if there isn't, the whole video restoration of these fairing parts are on our channel, and you would put in my name in quotation marks and then Ducati 888, and every one of those videos is still out there for somebody who's doing an extensive video repair. In this case, we even had to get the decals for this project from Australia and matching paint. Now today we're going to do some work on Joe Padula's Ducati 888. It's a bike that we did some of the restoration work on, I think 2 years ago, over the winter 2 years ago. And it was an incredible restoration. It required a lot of work, a lot of repair work. And boy, when I look back, I can't believe it came out as good as it did. We actually had to get the decals, well Joe had to get them from Australia. And it was a very, very labor intensive job during a winter that we had a lot of snow, and it was just a labor of love. Joe knows it. He has many times done mitzvahs for me, including the white stones in our garden, so I'm always happy to return a favor. Now, even better, we had a contact from a friend we met at the last meetup, Oscar, and Oscar has been watching, I guess, some of the videos, and I mentioned about the Canon camera having wind noise issues, and he said he has some information or some technology that'll help. Oscar, I'm looking forward to it. We're going to meet up with him soon. We're always looking to upgrade our videos. Now, it's the whole reason we have a channel, and that's why sharing the information. In the beginning, it was only among about 15 or 20 people that we had on the A team, but it's grown. We've got 10,500 subscribers now, and it seems to grow every day. And what's great about it is many of the people have made suggestions, made comments. We've actually gotten into the question and answer. We've learned a lot from other people that are more knowledgeable about certain areas. And we've tried to share what we know about motorcycling and paintwork, and actually carbon fiber too. So while I'm waiting for Joe to get here with the parts, Karen has a couple little errands for me to do. And also, we got to take care of the farm, the fish, the giraffe, the monkey, the donkey, whatever. And then we're free to work on Joe's parts the rest of the day. Okay guys, if you want to work on Ducatis, you gotta eat. Come on. Now it looks like we had some rain overnight. The rain just ended. Karen's garden, of course, blooming away. And the beautiful stonework that Joe was a big part of helping. That was 3 truckloads of stone with his truck. Joe, thank you. And of course, the pride and joy of our garden, Karen's Ducati duck. And these are the only plants left to go in the ground. Everything else has been planted. What a season this has been. The Arnowski Farmhouse and Motorcycle Restoration Shop. Don't worry, birds, when Joe gets here, he's going to give you extra seeds today. Don't worry, Joe's a generous guy. And it's not going to be long now. We're coming up on a time we're going to have our own fresh cut flowers pretty much every day here. Okay, so today we got our final, the package that we're expecting with the wind slayers, and these are real wind slayers, I hope. Again, we're going to find out. I'll put this ADORAMA, Adorama, and I found out they were one of the few that had these. Amazon had them, 1 for $40. These were 2 for $19. A little bit different. And it says on the package, it says they're real genuine GoPro, and I wanted to show the unboxing, of course. Let me show these up close. Now I have found, and so has Turbo Steve found, who this was his little thing he shared with us, and thank you Turbo Steve, Wind Slayer, but the real thing, it's got to be a real GoPro. Now they do make the Chinese ones, and I have several of them, that look exactly the same. They feel the same. You put them on the camera, nothing happens. Now, this is the only one I found that works. And I'm looking forward to if Oscar has something, and Oscar, I'm thanking you ahead of time, for we are always working on upgrading the videos, especially the sound. Now, here's some of the things I found out don't work. I had tried remote mics, and on some, not the GoPros, on some of the other cameras I had, and These like they're foamy, spongy things they sell you. There's big ones, little ones, ones that look like a lollipop. None of these ever did a whole lot to improve the sound or get rid of the wind noise. And you can spend a fortune on this stuff, and it doesn't work any better than if you do nothing. Now, we're always trying to share information. This is the jacket, the Tourmaster jacket, and we went to buy these batteries, and of course they were super expensive, and you couldn't buy them. They were either out of stock or they were over $40. Well, John Pothia came up with this replacement. Two of these were $24, and we just had to put I just changed the wire end, and that's a super simple thing to do. I did that on video, and now I can finally report. I've used these all winter. They hold a charge for the whole ride, and I always have a spare. Where when I had this one, if it ran out, I didn't have a spare. The only problem with this, you don't have the settings. But if you're going riding on a cold day, I leave it on full high anyway. And this is really a good tip. And that is a separate video. You just look up my name in quotation marks and electric jacket battery replacement, and that'll come up. Also, another thing I wasted money on, it didn't do anything as far as motorcycling goes. Now, it could be this is useful for some other use, but I tried mounting this remote from the camera on my jacket, on the gas tank, on the headlight. I put it an inch from the muffler. It did nothing. It was of no value, and I thought I'd pass that information on. If you're looking to upgrade the sound, this isn't going to do much for you. And again, I learned this the hard way. These are the fake ones, and I don't know how you could even tell the difference. You squeeze them, they feel the same. But of course, things that look the same aren't always the same. And a good example of it is bolts. You can have a grade 8 bolt and a bolt made out of tin cans. But anyway, when you have this camera, this is a Hero 3, and I cut this little hole in so I could see if it was running or not. The other thing I did, I made a little O-ring, and I'll show that too. I'm trying to share this information because a lot of the people go out and spend a lot of money, and what happens? You throw it all away, and in the end, you wish you would have bought this one first. That's one of the reasons we like to share information, and all the people that have contributed into this, thank you one and all. Now, I thought I'd share another little bit of information. This is the mount. This is my summer riding gear, of course. And what I found out, a couple of things about and it's Joe Rocket. The light color one gets dirty in a hurry, and of course it's very hard to clean. You got to work on it, but I just let it go at the end of last year. I got to clean it before we go out riding. But here's the whole thing with this. When I mounted this, and it's real tricky to do this, because this is thin material, so this tends to do this all over the place. So I mounted it to a piece of carbon fiber with, these are furniture feet, and what that does, and I taped it even inside with some Gorilla Tape, just to stabilize it, to make it that it doesn't jump around too much. And at the end, when I had this really did work pretty well. The camera snaps in and out, even with the wind slayer, it's relatively easy to get the camera on and off. And then I put a piece of Gorilla Tape on the bottom just for security. And the camera snaps in there pretty nice. And when you want to take it out, of course, it's hard to do this with one hand, but with the wind slayer on there, you've got to really be careful to get that in and not tear it all up. And of course, I've torn one up. That's how I know. But that's a nice way to mount the camera, unless you prefer on your helmet. My neck doesn't work the way it should, so when I take footage from my head, it's wobbling around. Maybe the ball joint in my head is not right, or my head isn't right. And this is the final tip. What this had done, of course it's all worn out. I have the new ones now. This had worked its way up. Let me show this. And kind of did that for one of the rides. I think it was the FCR ride. So I came up with this. I've just had an O-ring in my collection of stuff. Press that on there. And that's, well, you got to press it on. That solved the problem completely. And that is problem solved. So that's all good little information to know, and that's again what our channel's about, sharing information. And I know Joe's on his way already. I'll get the coffee brewing. Okay, so after a cup of coffee, I made Joe a cup of coffee and forgot to put coffee in it, so I expect he's not as alert as I am so far. Anyway, he's going to bring in the other part. There's some work to do on these. I see some scratches. We can get them out. And this was a true labor of love. It's all out on the channel. Just put my name in quotation marks and Ducati 888, and this will all come up. Anyway, I don't know, I guess he fell in the pond or something out there. Anyway, we put a lot of time into this, and I see a couple of scratches, but that's what we do best. Watch your head, don't go crashing. Ah, enough work there, enough work already. Okay, so we're going to try to remove some of these things with 4CR 8065, and we've already started one up here on the inside the scoop, but it's hard to get your finger in there. That's the thing. See, up here your finger is just too big to get in there, but we're going to give it a try. So the first thing I did is there's a couple little corners and areas and edges. I needed to get my little pinky finger in there. It was very difficult to get in the corners and stuff, and I don't know how some of these little defects and scratches and chips occurred, but it doesn't matter. The polish that we're using is usually pretty good at getting them out. Now, I try to take full advantage of the fact that I had Joe there to hold apart for some of this, but the biggest thing was getting, this is 2000 grit paper, trying to get in all the little corners and edges and little spots. Now, Joe had marked with blue tape some of the spots he wanted to touch up. Some of these are from putting the motorcycle back and forth together, and some of them occur when you transport parts. Some of them are just things that we wanted to buff up a little bit shinier than they were. Now, using the 8065, you can use it by hand, you can use it by machine. But in the little tight corners and edges and angles like we're working here, first thing I wanted to do is get as much of the hand buffing done as I could, and this is labor intensive doing it. Now, the 2000 grit paper, what I do is I just spit on it, really. They're just little spots that I'm trying to get out, and I'm trying not to sand away paint that I don't have to sand away. I just want to take enough material off that I can either buff it by hand or with one of the buffers. I have the two buffers out, the big one and the small one, and both of them have places where it's to your advantage to use them. But in all these little corners and valleys and edges and little tiny spots like this, there's just no substitute for just getting your little pinky finger in there. Or the other choice you have here is you've got to have a sanding block that goes down into the valleys when the valleys get too sharp for your fingers. And the next step is to get a clean microfiber and just see how quick this is paint that's over a year old, and see how quick it's going to come up to shine. Now, the next part of the job, using a small buffer. This is the Harbor Freight buffer with a terry cloth pad. And I would suggest if you're doing any of this, put a brand new pad on each time you use it. It just gets rougher and rougher as it gets older and older. A new pad is always a good investment. And I did this part. Some of this video I put in fast forward because this session went on for several hours. And I wanted to be real careful not to go over the corners or edges. And it's really handy to have Joe holding the part here. We kind of planned this out ahead of time. So we had the better part of a day to do this. We didn't want to do this and try to rush it in a couple of hours. Because these parts are irreplaceable. They're not available for anywhere I know of, anywhere Joe knows, actually at any price. This is a collector bike. It's a very rare bike. He's ridden it on a track. He's ridden it on the street. And I'm sure it's a keeper, just like the bikes in my small collection. And Joe does have an extensive collection of bikes. This is what I always refer to as a keeper. This is a bike we want to keep forever. Now, some of these defects and scratches were pretty deep, and you could get some good information off the video I just posted not long ago about getting rid of scratches in plexiglass windshields. The same rules apply to paint as to plexiglass. You've got to get enough material off that you've got the lowest spot of the defect or the scratch sanded smooth before you buff it, and then you have to buff it until the shine matches basically the rest of the part. Now, a lot of parts you have to do by hand. There's just no substitute for getting in these corners. Anything you can do by hand is labor intensive. Now, where you have to be super careful when you sand with the 2000 grit, the edges, all the corners and edges, anywhere there's a point or a sharp edge. And I did this very, very meticulously. With Joe holding it on the end of a table, it was a little bit difficult to do this. Now, when I did this, the original paint work, I did all this work alone, and it was even more difficult. This, having Joe there today, actually just made this go a lot smoother. Now, I put a lot of the wet sanding of the part in fast forward. It's a simple reason, otherwise the video gets so long, and actually some of the people have commented they'd like the videos to be shorter, and well, we try our best here. But anyway, avoiding the corners and the edges and all of this stuff, wet sanding, 2000 grit, and this is just something that you just really have to take your time and be careful of. There's no way you can do this with any kind of a machine, I know. It's all got to be hand sanded first. So at this point it's flat and we've got most of the imperfections out. And so we're going to put a brand new fine foam pad on the heavy duty buffer and see how that's going to cut. Remember, this paint is about a year old, a little more than a year old. So this is a brand new Bauer pad with 8065 4CR. And this is the kind of thing, it would really be difficult to do this if you didn't have somebody holding it. And this is really a high risk thing when you get to the corners and edges. Because if you burn through or do anything that you can't repair, you got to do an extensive touch up on the panel. And we were trying to avoid that at all costs, obviously. That's a lot of extra work. And in the end, any of the little scratches that were still there, and Joe had them all marked with blue tape. We tried to get some of them by machine, but a lot of them had to be done by hand. So I think we got, to be honest, I think we got most of the little scratches or divots or whatever they were out. Are you happy with that?
I would agree.
All right, let's move on. Now, because Joe was there, I was able to use the big buffer with the Bauer pad and 8065, and you can see if you didn't have somebody to hold that, now it would be really difficult. Now, a lot of times I've tried to do this with the parts bolted to the bike, and that gets just as awkward because a lot of times you're kneeling down or laying on your back, and I would never want to do this and run the risk that I'm going to do more damage than good. So a day like today, when we could schedule a whole day to do this, really take our time, make ourselves a few cups of coffee with no coffee in them, and really get down to the nitty-gritty here. This, I know Joe wants to be a perfect motorcycle when he's done with it. And I understand his passion for this. And the thing is, at this point in time, we just had to dedicate the better part of this day to just doing just what we're doing here. And the good news is we could just sit and chit-chat and tell war stories and whatever. But it was really rewarding to see the paint starting to really shine by the end of the day. And little by little, as we got rid of all the blue tape off the parts, got rid of all the scratches, the part really came to life. And some of the little delicate areas around the scoops, really delicate, because if you catch that buffer on the edge, I spent so much extra time cross-hatching this, doing it with 2000 grit, because in the end, I wanted this to be absolutely the best we could make it under these conditions. Now, I run this buffer on a really slow speed. Even though we have this footage in fast forward, it's going on speed 2. The only slowest speed would be 1. And it takes a little extra time, but it tends not to scratch and not to put any defects back in if you go around an edge. And again, where you're the most vulnerable here is when you get up around a corner, a high spot, or an edge. But that whole thing of just being fussier and fussier, back, wipe it off, put some more compound on, go back over it again, back, forth. There's just no substitute for this. It's like my dentist always says, good dental work takes time. And he's right. Okay, that looks like it came out okay. You happy with that?
That looks beautiful.
All right, so that's that. The soft, now what's happening is the soft pad is doing a nice job of cutting for us anyway, and this is, again, year-old paint. Now these scratches look, hefty. Well, I don't want to sand them yet. I think we can get that out with the buffer, with the big buffer. Now this top section, this seemed to be where the worst of the scratches were, the ones that were really deep. And I really didn't want to take a chance sanding them. There actually was a good chance because it's a lot of corners and angles and edges. I thought I'd just be real careful, put the buffer on the slowest speed possible, and just took my time. Of course, this footage is in fast forward by 10, so this really doesn't show you how long we took to do this. And it isn't a matter because we weren't doing this job trying to save time or anything. What I wanted to do was just do the best we possibly could while we had two people available, and it just makes it so much easier. And also because summer's coming, Joe wants to ride the bike. And when he puts it back together, I don't want to have to go back and do something, do it over and over, or even worse, do it while it's mounted to the bike. This saves so much time doing it this way. This job, if it was mounted to the bike, would have possibly taken 2 or 3 times longer to get the same result we got. So how bad is that? Does that suit your boat, your float? You ready to try going over those Australian decals?
No.
I'm a little nervous about going over those decals.
Leave them alone.
That really did come out pretty good.
Looks beautiful.
So what we decided to do, ultimately, we just went over the decals very, very delicately with the big Bauer pad and very, very carefully by hand. There weren't that many little nicks and dings there. So overall, though, the hardest thing of all is to stay away from those mountaintops, corners, edges, and just be patient. And it's really good when you have somebody helping you do this.
I can't believe
that's plenty good. And that's all 8065. There's no wax on that at all. Now, if we go get your wax, like the Colonite wax,
right?
I put some of that on a buffer. Woo!
Did you ever use McGuire's number 7?
So we had 2 panels to do, and by the end of the day, we got both of them done. I hope by putting a lot of this in fast forward, it wasn't too boring to watch. But it's a combination of some parts have to be done by hand, some parts have to be sanded with 2000, some don't. And it's good to just do little experiments until you find out what the appropriate buffer is and how many of the parts you really have to do by hand to keep it from being high risk. Come on, we're paying by the hour here, baby. Cleaning them up. Yeah, it's a piece of work when it's done. Came out nice. Is it glossy enough? That's what I need to know.
Yeah, I think it's glossy.
Glossy enough. Now, I want you to wax it. You want to put some wax on it? I think you should wax it before you go.
Well, I'm going to go home and...
Joe, I'd say that's pretty successful today.
I'd say that looks great. Thank you.
And if you put the Colonite wax on it, you're going to put McGuire's 7. Is that your choice?
McGuire's 7 to get more depth of color.
Okay.
And then I'll top.
So when can we get some pictures of the bike all put together? You going to insure it this year, or?
Oh yeah.
Oh, I'll come up to a photo shoot of it.
Good.
Put your red leathers on and make a Luciano all jealous. It really was an exceptionally productive day, and like any day with any members of the A-team, and Joe was one of the original ones, anytime we get together and work together, it's always a lot of fun to boot. Turbo Steve put Kenny Roberts, that's Kenny Roberts, on my RD in the driveway. Now, why would he be laying on the tank if he's in my driveway?
He's posing.
He's a poser anyway.
And the kickstand's down.
Yeah, no, the Turbo Steve did that. Very cool.
Well, that's pretty neat.
So even if you can't ride as fast as Kenny Roberts, or you're not as young and handsome as some people, hey, the one thing we all can have is a nice, clean, well-maintained, shiny bike. We all can have it. Well, the next time we see Joe's 888, it'll be all in one piece, and maybe we'll get a picture of him doing a wheelie. Now, if you're new to the channel or you don't go back, or when we were doing this project, I think it was over a year ago now, probably last winter, year and a half ago, this project was really labor intensive, and some of the things, the decals, the old factory decals, had to be sanded off. You can't take the decals off with a heat gun if they're under the clear. And the way this bike was made originally, or it was repaired once already, I don't know, it had clear over the decals. So that in itself was a labor-intensive job. We were working through one of the worst winter storms, and I remember doing a lot of the paint work, had to shovel my way out to the work table, and eventually, though, of course, we get one panel in prime. And then Joe decided he wanted to do the other panel. There was a couple of repairs on the bottom, if I remember right, from the track. and there were scratches and chips and cracks. All had to be fixed. Loads of labor. Yeah, it was the bottom where that's all sanded out. But a whole lot of this job, what really happened is it snowballed into a much bigger job than it originally started to be. And then once you get to a certain point, then you just may as well finish it the right way. There was no way you're going to get away without putting new decals on. No way we're going to get away with putting on the complete amount of clear. The Color Right paint was a really good match. That was a really good choice. And if the paint didn't match, that would have then been really a disaster. We would have had to paint the gas tank and whatever other parts of the seat, for instance. But it just reminds me, and it's why I take pictures of everything. Sometimes I just like to look back and see how a job evolved, and maybe some of the little shortcuts or steps. But usually what happens during any windy video, any of these videos, there's 2,500 of them out there now, and not counting the airplane videos, what happens is all through the job, it's sloppy, it's dirty, the parts look horrible, they look terrible, you think it's never going to happen, and you're worried, and you lose sleep, and all of a sudden one day, they're in clear, and they're buffed out. You put them up on a workbench, you take some pictures, and you think, wow, I must have been dreaming. And you can't believe how long some of these jobs and how many hours and how many afternoons and nights and evenings get absorbed into it. But when you're done, you've got something you can't buy in a store. In fact, you can't buy it anywhere. So I hope you did enjoy the video and sharing a day in my shop. The whole idea of these videos is to give you the feeling that you've been in my shop and hung out with us for a day with the A-team or whoever happens to be here, working on the projects we work on, sharing some useful information, and most of all, having fun. If you're not having fun, I'm not sure what the point of all this would be. The whole purpose is that you're supposed to enjoy it. And to be honest, I enjoy this kind of work. I enjoy shooting a video, I enjoy editing it, and I enjoy every part of motorcycling. And that's actually the only part I don't enjoy. And thanks so much for watching.